All right, so hello everyone and welcome to our session. Thank you so much for attending. Kevin gave a really good overview of a lot about what we're going to talk about today, where we are in our project earlier today in the Hyku update session. But today, in this session, we're going to give you some more details about what it is that we've been up to, some background information about our project and how we work together, and answer some questions about the Hyku for Consortia project, specifically removing barriers to adoption. So I'm Amanda Herford. I'm the Scholarly Communications Director for PALNI, and my pronouns are she and her. And presenting with me is PALNI's Institutional Repository Coordinator and Anderson University's archivist, Nick Stanton-Rourke, and I'll let him introduce himself in a little bit. And as I mentioned, we have others on our project team here as well, including our co-PIs for the grant and our executive directors, Kirsten Leonard and Jill Morris, and they can feel free to provide as many remarks as they want to during the Q&A time, and I definitely invite your questions as we get into this. All right, so a little bit of a reminder of who we are and what we're doing. We are a consortia collaborating together on our shared vision and values for an open source, affordable, scalable, and easy to use repository solution. So together we are collectively the PALs. We are PALNI and PALC. PALNI is the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana, and PALC is the Partnership for Academic Library Collaboration and Innovation. And we are partnering on this project so that we can share expertise within our consortia and across our institutions so that we can move together towards a common goal for shared repository services. So we not only partner with ourselves, but we also partner with other consortia, other Hyku users, developers, and the Samvera community at large in order to advance Hyku together. So partnership is really important to this project. So a little bit about our grant. We were awarded an IMLS grant for Hyku development in 2021. So it's a 2-year grant, and we are now in the second half of that grant. So this project really extends our previous work with Hyku, and the focus is to really further help us to engage with our users to identify the barriers that they're finding with the platform. And we're working to address some of those barriers that we identify through this grant with development in partnership with our partners at SoftServ. So ultimately, our goal is to make Hyku a more attractive solution, not just to our libraries, but to other consortia, to other collaborating groups, and to institutions seeking a repository solution. So our 3 major project goals are to first produce a comprehensive gap assessment for Hyku, again, highlighting what those barriers to adoption are. Second, to complete several tightly scoped development sprints, again with SoftServ, for those high priority features that our community of users identify as major gaps. And finally, we want to contribute an operational toolkit so that others can leverage what we've learned and the resources that we've created when they are thinking about seeking a shared repository solution and ultimately managing that shared repository solution once they undertake that. So to help us with goals 1 and 2, producing the gap assessment and getting started on the user-focused development, we've been doing some UX research to help identify some major user needs. And so here's a little bit more about that process. So one of our big accomplishments over the last year has been completing our first round of UX research. And this round has really focused on the librarian workflows working with Hyku, so sort of the back-end administrative functionality of working with Hyku. And here's a little bit of sort of what that process looked like. We first hired a UX consultant and met with them in order to sort of lay the groundwork for how we wanted the study to work. And the consultant then met with several of our users to talk with them in depth about their experience using Hyku. And they worked with them to gather ideas for improvement directly from the user. And the UX consultant then summarized his findings in a report which we shared with the Samvera community. So the results of the study found that our users are generally happy with the repository, but we did gather lots of helpful feedback in order to identify gaps in the areas of metadata, workflow, and user interface. So there is a blog post about this process, and the full UX report is available on our website at hikuforconsortia.org. So I invite you to check that out. And what we did with the report, we took the report and combined it with our user satisfaction survey that we ran last year, and combined those two pieces of information to make the basis for our gap assessment report that we're working on. So we have a list of gaps that is the data that's really informing the development decisions that we're making throughout our development in the grant project. So before I hand it over to Nick to talk more about that process, I wanted to share a quote from our UX report that the UX consultant put in. He said, "I encourage you to continue running a process that gives users a central role in defining, reviewing, and approving the features that are prioritized and developed." And I really wanted to share that because I think it illustrates kind of the driving force behind our development process. We want our users to be active partners in what we're doing and how we are making decisions for development moving forward. So now I'll hand it to Nick to tell you a little bit more about the user community that we've developed, some of the development that we've done so far, and some next steps.
Hi, everyone. We can go ahead and jump to the next slide. As Amanda said, my name is Nicholas Stanton Rourke, and I am the archivist at Anderson University, which is a small private liberal arts university in northern Indiana. And in that role, I am a loan arranger, and also I'm responsible for managing digital archives and also some aspects of publishing eScholarship or making eScholarship available online. And that role has really been an asset in my secondary role, which is as the institutional repository coordinator for the PALNI Consortium, because it's reflective of the needs of the kind of member institutions who make up a large percentage of our consortium and also multiple other consortia that we've worked with. Very often these are small private academic institutions who otherwise have not had access to institutional repository platforms of any size or scope, and so have been trying to cobble together other solutions, makeshift solutions, or just have been without. And by including them in the Haiku Commons user community, we have really kind of opened those doors for them. And so in my role as repository coordinator, I handle onboarding, maintaining documentation, troubleshooting, and also kind of liaising with our partners at SoftServ to communicate what our users are experiencing as difficulties or setbacks or frustrations or just questions, and then trying to turn that into future development. So that's the fit of that role has been really a benefit to our project. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the user community that we developed, because as Amanda said, that user community has been the driving force of this project and of the directions that we've taken development. So we've established a shared repository space that is intended to identify gaps in Haiku, to deduplicate work for the administrators of these repositories and also for ourselves in administering this grant or development, and to encourage sharing of solutions across institutions. And so there are members of both the PALNI and PALSI consortia who have repositories in the shared environment. And we also invited initially partners to pilot with us. We opened multiple tenants to Viva and Lewis, other academic consortia, and since then have been contacted by and created sandboxes, sometimes multiple sandboxes, for a really dizzying number of academic consortia. My knowledge of the consortial landscape has really increased through this, but some significant ones are Skelk, Atla have contacted us, and we've created tenants for them as well. And then that's all the tenants live together on the Haiku Commons domain, but we also established a user community using the Basecamp platform, where we have message boards where users can interact with each other, share tips, ask questions, and also make recommendations for further enhancement to the product itself. And on our on the Hyku Commons domain, we currently have over 50 repository tenants, of which 40-ish are sort of active IR tenants or digital humanities tenants. Of those, 16 are public, which is to say that they're publicly listed and accessible, and the rest are private, but a good number of those are kind of ready to make the leap and be switched on to public, which of course in Hyku is a very fast thing. We can go on to the next slide. So the first major set of development that we engaged in based on our user feedback was improving the bulk import and also the export option. The export being particularly important because if we're inviting piloters to contribute materials to an active repository, there's a very good chance that they'll either be moving into their own Hyku tenants in the future or maybe to some other tenant. And so they need to be able to get that work out, right? We intend for this to be production level piloting and participation. And our users indicated to us that uploading and creating works in batches was the biggest limiting factor. And I think that's especially true for our users who are migrating out of other proprietary systems and into Hyku, but also a lot of our users had these massive backlogs of materials that had been either born digital or had been digitized, but they had, again, no repository platform to place them in. And so they had these huge backlogs and they're ready to get moving on putting them in. And so improving import was a natural step along with creating the export. So with our partners at SoftServ, we had an import export sprint that included, we upgraded bulk racks functionality, fixed a lot of the latent bugs in bulk racks. We introduced fixes to the display of inaccurate import data in the dashboard. I think we've all experienced seeing these phantom numbers or numbers that just did not seem to indicate or inform us, really, just sort of these phantom bits of data in the dashboard. The dashboard is much improved now in the version that we worked on. I created the ability to export data necessary to reconstruct works in a separate repository, created metadata export for works, items, and collections, including not just metadata entered, but the internal metadata, when a work was last edited, last accessed, things like that. The export of digital objects and their thumbnails, and also introduced Baggett integration for export for increased utility with preservation systems, or just an interest in ensuring the integrity of the files that you're exporting out. And we do have a blog post about that as well, which I've just entered in the chat, and we can go on to the next slide. So what we've got going on right now is we are in the middle of an upgrade to what has been minted as, or is in the process, I suppose, of being minted as Hyku 5.0. It's a major upgrade. Certainly it's a major upgrade for us who were running on 2.3 most recently, but it's also a big upgrade to what Hyku offers. And some of the biggest things it brings in are functional analytics, the ability to feature collections on the homepage, so you're not at the mercy of the kind of random front page collection population. Cross-tenant searching, or searching across the entire site, and also some overhauls to the settings. Along with this, we are also overhauling our index and homepage on Hyku Commons. So watch this space. You'll see improvements to that homepage very shortly. And that should be finishing up by the end of this month is what we expect. And so that brings us to next steps. The next thing that we've got going on is we've already commissioned a front-end user experience study that's going to work with a number of different potential types of front-end users and mark data about what is and isn't working for them. We're going to continue focusing on user-centered development in our next set of sprints. And so the sprints that we have planned at the moment, one that we've already signed a statement of work for, takes a slightly different approach. It's kind of a mini sprint where we're picking up a bunch of high priority developments that just haven't fitted into the theme of sprints that we've done until now, and is bringing in some things that I think will be big improvements for the Haiku community overall, including the PDF triple thumbnail render error that I know has been plaguing all of us, but a number of others as well. And then after or alongside the continuation of these next several sprints, we are also developing this operational toolkit that's intended to benefit any collaborative repositories, consortial included, but not limited to consortial, and also intended to be somewhat platform agnostic. So just a toolkit for the managing of collaboration within the repository space. And so I guess that brings us to the lessons that we've learned. And one of the things that's come home most to me is just how extremely adaptable Haiku is. We've had people come to us from other consortia or other institutions with really imaginative ideas that have a lot of creative potential behind them, including the potential use of Haiku for storing materials for controlled digital lending, but also the functionality that Haiku has and the doors it opens for the kinds of institutions like Anderson University, who otherwise would not have repository software solutions. And again, Haiku is intended for this sort of pure IR, e-scholarship, faculty publications, and so on. But because it's so easy to use and adaptable, a lot of our schools are using it for digital humanities publication. And so enthusiasm for Haiku is welling up. I think we're at a critical juncture in the development. We're getting a lot of excitement from consortia and other groups. And so there's a lot of things on the horizon. And so that leads to, and some of the other lessons we've learned, just the development is very time intensive. And there's a need to streamline that development process and the interaction between user-driven enhancement and development and the somewhat limited scope of potential development that's out there. And so we're seeking creative solutions to kind of build that out. And I think especially because we're at such a critical time for adoption of Haiku, for all the things that it can do. But that said, there are still, and our current mini sprint with these high development priorities kind of emphasizes that to us, that there are these little kind of lingering or persistent frustrations, and none of them are necessarily deal breakers in themselves, but small gaps add up to barriers, and that will keep some institutional adopters away. And so closing those gaps, especially with input from our user community, is what's important, and particularly establishing what are the must-have features of a repository solution for us. And so we are excited to continue this work with input from both our immediate user community and also the Haiku community in general. And so with that, I would say thank you. And we are all here and available for questions for, I believe, the next 75 seconds, perhaps.
Yes, are there any questions?